Another popular narrative in the Western media about Vietnam, it suggests that there is a shift in the global supply chain from China to Vietnam. However, China remains Vietnam's largest trading partner and significant investor, and officials on both sides have asserted that China and Vietnam are actually cooperating and complementing each other within the global supply chain. Which version is closer to the truth, in your opinion?
It's the latter. It's complementary. China and Vietnam, the competition just does not really exist because each country is in their own particular stage of development. China has had more time, has had certain advantages historically, politically, economically, that Vietnam just hasn't had. Vietnam is only about 3 decades out from a total sanctions campaign after a massive decades-long war, first the United States, but before that France, which left it devastated without really any infrastructure, so to speak. While these two countries share very common histories of foreign interference, China has been able to develop a higher value added chain goods and has been able to enter into the supply chain in a much different way than Vietnam. While Vietnam's growth is very real, and I saw that for myself, that it is very real. The economy is very robust and it's very successful. However, because Vietnam is still at a stage of underdevelopment below that of China's, that means that what China has to offer indeed complements Vietnam, and what Vietnam has to offer indeed complements China. When I was in Vietnam, I noticed that there's a huge need for transportation, infrastructure development. And guess what? Well, when these two countries were meeting during this state visit, that's exactly what they were talking about, how to increase not only Vietnam's capacity, but the linkage between the two countries when it comes to the rail system, because that will allow for both countries to benefit from their cooperation, to increase trade by a massive amount. And that is the goal here. The goal here is to build each other up. It is not to take each other down. And Vietnam has a lot that it could benefit from better relations with China. And China can also continue on its path of building a modern socialist country with what Vietnam has to offer. And that is only the beginning, really. But it is indeed a possibly lucrative and complementary relationship that is years in the making and now has taken, I believe, a huge leap during this state visit.
In fact, that's my next question. The fact that both China and Vietnam are modern socialist countries, in what ways does Vietnam see elements from the Chinese governance model and political system as relevant and important to its own system? Can you possibly provide some examples of specific areas where the two countries are cooperating in terms of governance and political practices?
Vietnam and China both are led by incredibly popular communist parties. While they're different in form and, of course, match their respective cultural, national, economic, political characteristics of each country, the Communist Party of Vietnam and the Communist Party of China do share a fraternal bond because they're both communist parties following the path of Marxism toward a modern socialist and indeed, as outlined in both constitutions, a communist world. That's the common goal that they share. Now, what's very interesting is that because both countries are led by communist parties, that the governance, the way that governance is done, is different than in the United States or in the collective West. There is an emphasis on a whole process kind of democracy where people are not just involved in the party, but that they're involved in all aspects of society, and that the emphasis is on quality leadership, how the communist parties of both countries lead the way in charting a vision for economic development that is congruent to the national characteristics of each country are very similar, emphasizing the introduction of the market, the integration of the economies in the greater world economy, while maintaining socialist governance systems that can allow for the achievement of goals outlined in 5-year plans. This state visit really just scratches the surface of what has been building over the years. that China and Vietnam being neighbors and having so much that each can give to each other, it only makes sense that these relations will strengthen and that the communist parties of both countries will continue to grow stronger bonds as the years move forward. And this visit by Xi Jinping is a huge step in that direction.